Welcome to the Evolved Caveman, where men learn to be successful and happy with your host, Dr. John Schinnerer, as he shares the most impactful ideas and practices for you to get the most from your relationships, your work, and from your life. Now here's Dr. John.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Evolved Caveman. This is Dr. John, and today I'm really pleased to have with me an old friend, Ben Gioia. And today we're going to be talking about loving-kindness meditation. And this one's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I teach this skill to my clients, and it's not one that I pull out quickly. It's one that I need to know the client a little bit of time for, because a lot of men will go, I'm not really comfortable with that. There's something in there that hits them and it makes them uncomfortable. So we'll get into that a little bit with Ben. But the simple idea behind this idea of meditation, this form of meditation, is the recognition that all of us want to be free from suffering and we all want to be happy. And that need to connect with other people is a fundamental human motive. And when you feel connected to others, you get this host of mental and physical health benefits. And some of the benefits that we've seen in studies are less anxiety, less depression, more frequent and intense positive emotions, greater kindness and compassion for self and others, increased satisfaction with your relationships, greater resiliency, in other words, you bounce back from adversity more quickly, and you have an increased ability to focus and concentrate. So a great list of benefits from a relatively simple practice, but one that you have to keep up with over time. So let me pull Ben in and introduce Ben. Ben is the creator of the Influence with the Heart method. He helps people connect to their purpose and create a plan to joyfully express it in an authentic, sustainable, and profitable way. He's a 2-time bestselling author and international speaker. So whether he's positioning global thought leaders, teaching leadership and loving kindness to audiences at Stanford, or helping a Fortune 100 company implement emotional intelligence, Ben is highly recognized for shifting culture, improving resilience, and turning employees into evangelists. The president and founder of InfluenceWithTheHeart.com, Ben's teachings on empathy, story, and innovative thinking are used by over 30,000 entrepreneurs, employees, and leaders worldwide. Ben, thanks so much for joining me. How you doing?
It's my pleasure, John. I'm doing great. It's so nice to be here. It's so nice to have this kind of conversation with you, not only because of the amazing things that you're doing and how you're serving your people, but the fact that we're doing it also in the context of our friendship, having known each other for a few years, it just makes this so much more fun as well.
Yeah, there is a warmth and comfort to this, which I really enjoy. So you went to a retreat recently on specifically loving kindness meditation. So talk a little bit about what it is and why it's so important to you.
Yeah, thank you. This is so fresh for me as well, because I literally came back from that retreat just a few weeks ago, and I had been practicing a different kind of meditation for the last 12 years, a type of one-pointed concentration where I was focusing on body sensations, and suddenly I came across this new teacher and new practice where the focus was on loving kindness. So essentially what I was learning, and what we're going to talk about today, is cultivating that feeling of love and well-being for ourselves and for the people around us. And John, you named them before, like all the amazing benefits that happen as a result of doing this practice. And it's so funny, it's so simple, deceptively simple, and sometimes really can bring up a few sticky spots in our experience, because I think as men, right, as the evolving cavemen that we are, we have, there's so much around strength and power and pushing through our emotions and getting it done and killing it and nailing it and all those words, and then suddenly somebody says to us, hey, we're going to do a practice called loving kindness, and it's like, hey.
Well, it's interesting. I've had businessmen come back and, I've taught them how to do it. I give them an audio file to go home and practice this. And one guy came back, I remember, I'll never forget. He came back and he said, I got to the point where I was trying to wish kind thoughts upon myself, and I stopped. I had to stop. Like, it was so weird to him and it felt so uncomfortable. I don't think it was something he'd ever done. And I think it's true for most of us that we don't have much experience wishing kind thoughts upon ourselves, and it kind of flies in the face of that inner critic, which we're really comfortable with.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of why we need to do it.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Right. It's so interesting because, for those of us who are bringing a sense of care into the world, very often we're taught to care for others and serve others, and change the world by changing other people's lives. And it's like, hey, wait a minute, whatever we're going to do out there needs to start in here, right? Like
and can I jump in there? So what happens if you just over focus on serving others and taking care of others and taking on their burdens and pains and emotions? What happens to you?
Many things, burnout, resentment, anger, drinking, drugging.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to highlight that point because that was how I was raised, that, you're supposed to serve others. You're supposed to think of others first, which I think is very noble and self-sacrificing. But if you take that to the limit, I've talked to so many people that have burned out and just kind of shrivel up and can't do it anymore. And so I think it's a really important point to remember to put yourself and your needs first, because if you're empty, you've got nothing to help to give to others.
Yeah, exactly. Beautifully stated. I mean, even the Buddha, the historical Buddha said, hey, get enlightened first, so to help others become enlightened as well. So
I'm still working on that part.
Yeah, me too. Step by step. That's the evolving part of this process. Yes. Yeah, and I appreciate also what you shared about your client, because very often when we go into the space of offering loving kindness to ourselves and we hit that sticking point, that's usually a sign that we need to bring in a little forgiveness into the mix to ourselves, right? Like forgiving ourselves sometimes for things that we can recognize, and sometimes for even things that we can't quite recognize yet, right? And to be able to open up that space for the love to come in. Because
what's something you've had to forgive yourself for in the past?
Oh,
just one thing, not the whole list.
Thank you. I was going to say, how long is this interview? It's how I very unlovingly and uncompassionately departed from several romantic relationships. I believe the term is ghosting, where you just kind of disappear. Yeah. And I wasn't trying to disappear, but my lack of clear conversation, clear communication, being supportive of this friend and this other human being, I just did a really, really bad job at several times. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I was just thinking that there's always something that I'm working on forgiving myself for. Being human sucks at times. It's just hard, right? It's a constant struggle at times. But in my current relationship with Jory, who's a therapist, she went away for a month to Europe. And it was sort of this, there was a family event going on in Israel, and, there was layers to it, which I won't go into, but it made me, I think it hurt because I felt excluded. It was hurtful, but then I was also getting irritable and angry, and I just couldn't kind of manage that emotion while she was gone. And I was really, really frustrated with myself, which made the whole thing more difficult. Right. And then there was a point where she got, I don't know if it's sick. She had an allergic reaction while in Paris and had her whole body broke out in hives, and her airway could have swollen shut. So it was really potentially life-threatening. So at 4 a.m., she's taking an Uber by herself to an ER. And I'm like, okay, this is my worst nightmare. Like, she's across the world and I'm here and there's nothing I can do.
Right.
And so, for me, it's always these emotions that come up that I'm struggling with.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so amazing because there's the emotion, and then there's all the story that we can add on top of it. And then there's that, that spiral.
Yeah. Right? As Brene Brown says, what's the story you're telling yourself?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you get angry, and then you feel ashamed or guilty about being angry, and then you're angry at yourself for being angry, and so forth.
Right. And now that Jory's on the way to the hospital, I feel like a schmuck for being angry.
Yeah.
At her.
I feel guilty.
Right? Guilt. For excluding me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful, beautiful moment and opportunity for loving kindness. And sometimes, there are times when we can actually stop and, sit down and do a formal kind of meditation of sitting with our eyes closed. And there's sometimes we can't. And what I like to recommend to people is just put your hand on your heart, right? And just just take a breath and, give yourself a break. Sometimes we can't even get to the point of hey, may I be happy? may I be loving? And it might just be like, hey, can I just give myself a break for a moment and stop beating myself up?
Sorry to interrupt. You bring up an interesting point about the physiology, and I've heard this several times, primarily Kristen Neff, who does a lot of work, the best work in self-compassion. Yeah. And she says, put your hand on your heart and kind of feel the energy coming out of your heart. Yeah. But the other one is, give yourself a hug, because your brain doesn't know the difference of yourself giving you a hug versus someone else giving you a hug. And so you still get the same oxytocin dump, and oxytocin is the neurotransmitter responsible for trust, rapport, bonding, friendship, that sort of thing. Either one of those or both of them will calm your physiology and activate that parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest response.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, thank you. I didn't know I knew that, you could, the brain didn't differentiate between several things, like, when we envision a positive future, those kinds of things, but I didn't know about the hug.
Yeah. And you have to be careful where you do these things. I'm always telling my clients, like, you don't want to just be in the store, be like, because then they come out and they get the real, straitjacket. Yeah. And there's a thought stopping technique that I'll tell clients, like, if you're having, a hard time stopping that runaway train of thought, you can actually go stop and, hit a surface. And that's one way to help stop your thoughts. But like, if you're a high school student, you don't want to do that in class.
Right.
It might draw some odd looks.
Yep, totally. That's a great bunch of tips. Thank you.
Absolutely. So go back. So pardon my tangents. Go back into loving kindness. So tell me more, like, what was the practice about? What was different in the retreat as you learned loving kindness versus how you knew it before?
Yeah. So in the past, I was doing a lot of breath awareness, just the feeling of breath, on the upper lip or kind of on this mustache space, if you want to call it that. And then moving into feeling sensations on the body, just being aware of them, noticing whether they felt pleasant or unpleasant, just noticing, okay, there's that feeling. Not even verbalizing, but just noticing, bringing the awareness in. And in this case, the technique was to actually start out by thinking about a time that you were happy, right? And then if you couldn't think about a time you were happy, to picture yourself holding, something that you could very easily love, like if you have a child, or if you're a fan of kittens, or if you're a fan of puppies, something that really brings that heart energy into the mix. And then, that cultivates that kind of warm and glowy feeling in your heart, right? And then that warm and glowy feeling becomes the object of meditation instead of your breath or instead of the body sensations.
Yeah, it makes me think of expansiveness in the chest. Mm-hmm. Like, I think if you think of pride, the shoulders pull back, the chin goes up slightly, but it's a chest opening, a heart opening. So, you pulled the shoulders back and kind of exposed your chest and your heart to the world, which I think also kind of replicates that same feeling.
Yeah. And then there's, the next step, which you'll hear about probably in almost any meditation technique, is that it's very easy for us to get distracted, right? Like, there's that term monkey mind, or all the things coming through my brain, and what do I got to do, and past, and, regretting the past, worrying about the future, all these things. And the instruction from the teacher was, anytime you get off track, you recognize you're off track, and then you bring your attention back. And you do it by relaxing, and especially your head, relaxing your head and smiling, and then coming back to that warm and glowy place. And that relaxing and smiling step, being part of the meditation process, was a total game changer for me.
It's interesting you say the relax your head part, which is not a phrase I've heard very often, but I see it in clients a lot, where I've seen some, let's say, angry men. One in particular I was thinking of was quite jacked, worked out a lot. And he just had an angry look on his face, if not angry, irritated, tense at minimum. And I told him one time, relax your face, like relax your jaw, just let it hang. And he looked at me and he was like, no, I can't do that. All right, fuck it. Like, okay, be pissed off. I just thought it was a funny response. It's like, no.
Right.
Okay, well, Thanks for your willingness to play the game.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. It's amazing what we humans can hold on to, right? Like, because it's the way we've been doing it. It's what we're used to. It could be part of a defense mechanism or what has helped us and served us in some ways. And then, somebody else says, hey, why don't you try it a little bit differently? It's like, nah, I'm not doing that. I'm not hugging myself. Right.
I know what it's like to be angry. I don't know what it's like to be relaxed.
Right. Yeah. And interesting too, you made the point about the hug kind of faking out your brain. The smile fakes out your brain as well, right? In that, we smile when we're happy, but we can also make ourselves happy by smiling.
Yeah, it's the information in the brain is bidirectional.
Bidirectional, thank you. Great word.
It goes both ways. And it's funny, and one of the things in emotion research is it's really hard to get people in the same emotional state okay, so you're at a 0 on a 1 to 10 scale or a 1. Now we're going to do an intervention. Let's see where you're at. But normally with emotion, people come into any sort of experiment and they're all over the map. And so one of the things they do to get around that is they'll actually take like a pencil and everyone will put a pencil in their mouth. Because it simulates the muscles used when smiling.
Oh, brilliant.
They'll make an O with your lips to replicate or reproduce the emotion surprise.
Okay.
And so they're starting to get some ways to get to it. I don't think it's perfect yet, but to your point that, smiling will tell your brain, oh, I'm happier. I don't know about happy, but happier.
Yeah. And that's really interesting what you're saying about, creating that baseline, right? Because having people all over the place doesn't make for a sound experiment, right? So, what if I'd like to see a photo of all those people with.
Yeah, it would look kind of silly, but happy. Yeah. So I'm sorry I interrupted. So continue with.
Yeah, so it's basically the staying with that glowy, warm feeling, and whatever it is. It can be intense. It might not be intense. Doesn't really matter. Just, be with that. You get distracted, you relax your head, right? Very often when we get tense, I've not corroborated this in depth, but I think it's the meninges gets a little tight, so that was where the relaxing the head from this teacher came from. So head cascades to face, and then smiling is a beautiful way just to help the rest of your body relax, and then coming back again to that feeling of loving kindness, and, starting with yourself, which is beautiful and powerful, and then extending that outward is something that you start doing a little bit over time. So, someone that you care about, they usually recommend that you don't choose a spouse or a romantic partner or a family member, because very often those relationships can be multi-nuanced, right? So someone that you love and care for and you wish the best for, may they be happy, but who's a little bit removed, from the multi-nuanced experience.
It's interesting in your most recent learning that it starts with you and then spreads outward. The way I've been taught is you start with the person that you love or that loves you unconditionally, which could be your pet, but start there. Then it's the two of you together, wish kind thoughts upon the two of you. And then you go to you, which I always thought was kind of brilliant in the setup, because I think it's hardest for us to get to wishing kind thoughts or sending love and compassion to ourselves.
Yep. I agree. I've heard it. I've heard different teachers teach it both ways. And just, with this teacher, it was the starting with the self, which, kind of lines up with the things that we were talking about at the beginning of our discussion, right? Of filling the well, inside first. And what he was saying is if you're having that difficulty with yourself, then potentially moving to that space of forgiveness until you can actually say, may I be happy, or feel the glow for yourself.
Yeah, because I do think some people, either they're angry at themselves or their self-worth is so low that they really have a hard time thinking anything kind about themselves, that they don't deserve it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that can get in the way for people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tricky. The mind can be such an ally at times and such an insidious bastard at other times.
And both simultaneously.
Right.
So
Yeah.
would you mind running us through a short version of loving kindness?
Sure. Absolutely. Be delighted to. So just, invite everybody who's listening, watching, if you're not driving at the moment, to close your eyes and sit comfortably in your seat. And just feel your body, the weight of your body on the seat, the back of the seat, your feet on the floor. And just let yourself breathe. Don't try to breathe in any way. Just let your breath breathe you. And let your body do what it knows how to do. And now, bring to mind a time that you were happy. Whatever that is. And connect with that feeling of happiness. And then as you're feeling that happiness, just let it settle right into your heart. It might feel like a warmth. It might feel like a glow. Whatever it feels like is the right way for it to feel right now. And then just as you're breathing, just keep your attention and awareness on that warm, glowy feeling. And then as you're feeling that feeling, just say to yourself or think to yourself, may I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be at ease. And if you find it helpful, feel free to put a hand or both hands on your heart. Continuing to feel that warm, glowy feeling. May I be happy. May I be peaceful. And then we're going to start sharing this feeling of loving kindness outward. So think of someone you love, even if it's a pet, someone who's living now. Not so much your family member, not so much your spouse or partner. And in the way that you've been happy, wish that they may be happy as well. May this person be happy. May this person be peaceful. And chances are, at some point, if not several times, you've already gotten distracted and lost track of that warm, glowy feeling, and that's okay. Nothing wrong. This is not a contest. So anytime you realize you're off track, just notice you're off track. Relax your head, your face. Smile. And come back to that warm, glowy feeling. Now we're going to spread the circle a little bit bigger. And just bit by bit by bit, and let that warm, glowy feeling expand outward from you. You don't need to push. You don't need to make any effort. Just think of how a candle flame makes light just by being itself. You can let your love expand outward in the same way. Everyone in the room around you, everyone in the house or the building that you're in, everyone in your town or city, there's plenty of love available inside of you. You're not going to run out. And continuing outward to your state or your region, your country, your continent. And as you're feeling this love and sharing it out, just keep a tiny smile on your face, a little Buddha smile. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be free from suffering. And just stay with that feeling of loving kindness, that warm, glowy feeling in your heart for a few more breaths. Keeping that little smile, that Buddha smile on your face. And then as you continue to breathe, Start wiggling your toes. Wiggling your fingers. Very slowly and slightly moving your body just a little bit. And when you're ready, open your eyes and smile.
That was outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I love that.
Yeah, it's such a great practice. You said a couple things that distracted me, but made sense. One was, it's not a contest. And I think that for many of us men, the way we're socialized and brought up, we're very competitive. We're always trying to win, do things faster. And I think practices like this, for many of us, can be challenging because you have those thoughts of, am I doing it right? Am I doing this, properly? Am I winning? I don't know, it might be a stretch, but, I think to remind ourselves that this is a practice. It's called a practice for a reason. That you continually practice it. There's no end goal. There's no winning. There's no being the best at it.
Right.
And that's the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
The other thing I was thinking is there's other statements that I really like inserting in this as well. One is, may I feel safe and secure. And the reason for that is we found that if you don't feel safe and secure in the moment, then you've effectively cut off half of the positive emotions available to you. Because you need to feel safe and secure as a precursor to feeling those emotions. In other words, like for instance, laughter. Like if you're in a shady alleyway at 2 a.m. in the morning, you're not going to be laughing if you see someone coming at you that's, big and ominous because you don't feel safe enough to laugh. So may I feel safe and secure is one I like. I also like, may I feel worthy? Because I think self-worth is such a big deal for so many of us that it's really at the core of a lot of struggles that we have.
Yeah.
So those are two that I like to insert.
Yeah, thank you. Those are fabulous and for spot on reasoning. So thank you for sharing that as well.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about how do you bring this off the cushion? So how do you bring it into your everyday life?
Yeah. So, you can walk around, be at your desk, doing your thing, whatever that thing may be. And the fastest thing you can do that sometimes even when you can't quite get to the space of loving kindness is just to keep that little smile on your face, right? First and foremost, to really keep yourself, keep your brain and your energy oriented to that space of safety, of ease, of joy, even if it's a very subtle joy. So that's first and foremost. Like the teacher, when I was on this retreat, kept saying, "You're not smiling enough."
That's good feedback. I like that right there.
I've never heard that at a meditation retreat. I've not heard anything about smiling at any meditation retreat that I've been at. So that was, fun and disruptive as well, in a beautiful way. And then, just walking around and sharing that loving kindness, sharing your smile with people, and extending that wish of, may you be happy. When you're driving in your car and you're in the middle of traffic, rather than, sitting there and going, oh, these, freaking idiots, right? Like, here we are again, just sitting there and wishing love and happiness to the people around you. Like, it's an amazing shift in your experience right in that moment. Like, imagine being in traffic and chilling, right? And vibing and enjoying that. Because, there are so many times where we can't change the reality of the moment, right? Traffic, stuck in a meeting that sucks, being in an argument with someone, navigating some physical pain or emotional pain. But we do have the option to minimize or at least reduce our suffering in those moments. And very often that smile and that wish of love is a great way to do that.
Yeah, I like setting up certain triggers to remind me to get into that mode. For instance, you're in a long line at the supermarket use that as a trigger to remind yourself of, just start wishing kind thoughts on people around you in line, on the cashiers. May you be happy, may you be healthy. I also I've taught a lot of people that when they're in arguments with loved ones or even people at work, a lot of people get people coming at them with anger. And so it's really important to learn to keep your physiology as relaxed as you can in those arguments so you can think clearly. So one of the things you can do is just repeat the thoughts of something like, may you be happy, may you be at ease, may you be peaceful. And you pick two and just think them. And the purpose of it is to think kind thoughts upon them, but also to reduce your own physiological arousal so that you can stay calm. I mean, I remember I did this in court when my ex-wife dragged me into litigation. And in order to stay calm in front of the judge, I would just wish kind thoughts upon her while we were in the courtroom.
Yeah.
And it works remarkably well.
Yeah, it really does. And I don't know if there's data to support this, but I've often had the experience of being in an environment that was charged in some kind of way, and me wishing the kind thoughts and, the person's energy changing. Right?
I've heard that story before.
Yeah.
An MD that I taught this to was doing a lot of Skype calls at the time, and he would have people that would be on the other end of the call and be frustrated or angry and kind of escalating with him. And he would do this practice and they would relax during the call.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
emotional contagion. It's empathy.
Yeah. Yeah.
That goes both ways too.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's my favorite E word. Empathy.
So let's talk for a few minutes about forgiveness and how that factors into this, because I look at forgiveness and I see it as multi-layered. So I think part of it's forgiving yourself, which is, again, one of the hardest layers to this. Yeah. Forgiving others, allowing others to forgive you. And then to the extent that you're spiritual and believe in a higher power, I think there's forgiving your higher power and allowing your higher power to forgive you. And the reason that part came to me, and that's mostly based off Fred Luskin's work at Stanford, but I remember I was a school psychologist many, many years ago, and a teacher asked me to see a 12-year-old GATE student. And this young girl had lost a niece of hers, and the niece was only 6 months old. And the families were very close, and this young girl couldn't stop crying right after this happened, which makes complete sense.
Sure.
And she said, "Can you talk to her?" And I'm like, "Sure," but I had no idea what I was going to say.
Right.
But what do you say? I mean, it's tragic. The niece, she died of sudden infant death syndrome. So no one's to blame. It's just a tragedy. So she came in and she kind of told me what happened. And she started crying. And as we were talking, I realized that she was very Christian. And, it struck me, I thought, maybe she's really angry at God, because there's no one for her to be angry at. But I think the human mind, the emotional mind, wants to be angry at someone.
Right.
And I think it's natural. It makes sense to me that in those cases where it's a tragedy, we go to, I'm pissed off at God.
Right.
And so I mentioned that to her, and she was like, "Oh, no. Like I couldn't do that. That would be a sin."
Right.
Okay. Yeah. I get that. And it also makes sense from an emotional place that you would be angry at God. And if you believe that God had a hand in making you at some level, from creationism to intelligent design, evolution, whatever you believe, that he also created our emotions, and he knows you're going to be angry at him for something like this. And to him, it's like a drop of rain in a rainstorm. It's not that big a deal. And he's already forgiven you. Right. Now you just have to forgive him for allowing this to happen. Right. And just kind of gave her permission to feel what she was feeling towards her higher power. And it turned out quite well. The mom called me the next day, and I thought I was going to get in trouble for talking about God in the public school system. But she wanted to thank me and just say, my daughter came out of her room for the first time in a week, and she had, a partial smile on her face. I don't think she was completely recovered from the grieving, but she felt some relief. And it made me realize that there's times when I think we need to practice forgiveness of our higher power in these situations, simply to get rid of our emotions from a human perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's tragedy that happens, and there are things that we can't make any sense of or make any meaning of. And I think that's a beautiful opportunity to, forgive what is beyond us, in whatever shape
Because I think like 85 to 95% of the US believes in a higher power in some form. And the atheists that I've talked to, the people that don't believe, I wonder how many of them are actually people that are just pissed off at God. That something happened and they're like, God, how could you let this happen? And they get angry and they just turn their back on God or a higher power. And I think there's some real legs to that theory. I have nothing behind it, but.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I wouldn't be surprised as well, and not as not thinking critically about these people, but, people will deal with grief and anger and tragedy in all different ways, right? And not all of them work. Some work better than others, And I think that forgiveness, what I've really come to understand over the years is, that it is so much more the person doing the forgiving, is the big beneficiary in that relationship. I mean, certainly the person being forgiven, like let's say it's a fight between spouses. Of course, both of them are going to feel better, but there are sometimes when someone needs to forgive something or someone that's out of their control. I'm thinking of like the apartheid, post-apartheid hearings in South Africa, the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, where there was this mass level forgiveness
after genocide. Yeah,
after genocide, after apartheid, like all these things, where people weren't necessarily able to, forgive a specific person, necessarily who wronged them, but to offer forgiveness to this bigger thing that happened, really empowered them and gave them the opportunity to move on in their lives, as the rest of the country was moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I used to speak at a continuation high school, years ago, and I would go there once a month, and the students seemed to like it, which always kind of surprised me because they had some of them were ODD, oppositional defiance, some were ADHD, some were pregnant, some were, failing out of high school. So, there's all sorts of issues why they were there. Yeah. And I would go in and talk about emotions and, positive psychology, and they liked it. But I remember there was a murder that took place in our town. 17-year-old kid got shot and killed on his patio over a drug deal gone wrong, which is unusual for where we live. Yeah. And so I was asked to come in and speak. Well, I was scheduled to speak a day later. And I asked the principal, do you want me to speak on kind of grieving and how to get past it? And she said, yeah, do that. And so I came in and talked about forgiveness primarily and, why you do it, how you do it, the benefits of it, finding meaning in tragedy, that kind of thing. And forgiveness, you don't need to be face-to-face to the offending party to do it. You can do it just in your mind. It's a daily practice. It might feel uncomfortable at first, like any new skill. But after I would give these talks, they were in classes of like 10. And so they would go back and debrief and kind of talk about what the presentation was about. And so in this one classroom, this one tall kid, 6'4", big 17, 18-year-old kid was like, I never thought I would forgive my dad for leaving my family when I was 2 years old. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to work on that. Mm-hmm. All right, that's cool. Yeah. And then this one beautiful 17-year-old female spoke up and she said, my mom forced me into prostitution at the age of 14. And right now I'm glad she did, because if she hadn't, I wouldn't have been here to get this information. And I'm going to work on forgiving her for that. And the reason I tell that story is because I think a lot of times we get stuck on this idea that what happened to me was so bad, it's unforgivable. Mm-hmm. And, Fred Luskin has done work in Ireland and in some of the inner cities in the US to teach parents to forgive the murderers of their children. So really, there's nothing that's unforgivable. We just think it's unforgivable. And we can really practice forgiving anything. It's just a matter of daily practice.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing those. Those are really, really powerful. Yeah, I have my own experiences and stories of witnessing things like that. And it is amazing what we humans can do in that space of forgiveness.
And what we need to do, I think. I think it's a really, really critical skill.
Yeah. Yeah, and it changes people's lives. Like when when you let go of that thing that you've been harboring, there's a lightness, there's a new kind of energy. There's so much space for other things to happen in your experience that's no longer taken up by, this sometimes obsessive, memory or energy around this thing that happened. And a lot of times, the thing that happened, I mean, probably most often, is that it's the thing and all the stories that we've added onto it over the years, and how our memory of that thing probably has changed a little bit, right? Whether for good or for bad, but it's changed. So we're, now operating in this space of holding on tightly to something that might not even be completely accurate anymore. And I'm not minimizing anybody's experience when I say that. It's just that it's so complex. And, ultimately it is something that happened in the past, and we are all worthy and we all deserve to be able to be free, in the present and in our futures. And forgiveness is a really, really powerful way to do that. And sometimes it can take a really long time.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that this is a great spot for a shameless plug, so I'll put it in there that I do have a mini course on forgiveness at my shop at guidetoself.com. And it's, 7 10-minute audio files that kind of explain how to forgive and why you want to forgive. It's cool. I actually recorded it for Simple Habit, which it's on, and it's been listened to almost 40,000 times, I think, on there.
Nice.
Which every little bit helps for the world we're in.
It sure does. And I remember when you created that, actually. That was really exciting.
Yeah, I was excited.
Yeah. It's like, hey, I'm doing this thing. I was like, woohoo.
All right. So I want to wrap up. I want to respect your time. Is there anything that I didn't? I mean, I know there's a lot of other places we could go, but is there anything I didn't ask you that I should have? Anything that you feel compelled to share before we wrap up?
Gosh. I don't think so.
Okay.
There's a million things we could talk about, but I just kind of checked in with myself, my body at this moment, and I feel really complete. And
maybe we'll have to do this again at another date, because I know there are a lot of other topics we could talk on. And so your website is influencewithaheart.com. Is there
That's
any
correct.
other social media that you want to put out there before we wrap up?
Yeah, actually, so I created a very interesting meditation that is just about to be published. I don't even have the information for where it's going to be published, but it's a meditation on transforming suffering. And there's also an adjunct story that is part of it. So if that resonates for anybody who's listening or watching, just send me an email, ben@influencewithaheart.com. Once again, ben at BEN at influencewithaheart.com. And I would be happy to share that with you when the time comes. I'm super, super excited. The people who invited me, they have an app that offers meditation and tools for people who are either have been diagnosed with cancer, recovering from cancer, caregivers, etc. And they said, hey, we know you're doing this work around loving kindness. We'd love if you did something. And I said, well, how about something around transforming suffering? And they said, okay, that's it. So it's just coming out of production. And would love to get that into everybody's hands. And
Congratulations.
thank you so much. Yeah. And you don't have to have anything to do with cancer to benefit from this meditation.
That was my next question, because it seems like that's a natural for all of us, because we're human, because we suffer. Is it cancer specific?
Exactly.
The other thought that I had before I wrap up is that, I was thinking, can we cut the meditation that we just did out of this and post that on its own?
Yeah. I would love that. Just, share it with me and I'll
Absolutely.
I'll post it as well. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I just thought, we can talk about that more, but I think it'd be great for you to have, great for it to be posted around.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then, people don't have to, listen all the way through or 2/3 of the way through to get to it the next time.
Because that's the request I'm going to get. Can I get just that?
Yeah. Yes, you can. We're thinking ahead.
All right. Well, Ben, hey, thank you so much for taking the time today. As always, I always enjoy our talks. And one of the reasons I think I really enjoy them is that you do such a good job embodying what you teach.
Thank you.
And I appreciate the hell out of that.
Thank you so much. That means a lot coming from you, first of all, and it also means a lot because that's something that has been tremendously important to me and something that I've come to understand is so key to the things that we're offering in the world, whatever we're bringing to the world, in whatever form, just really embodying that. We can do so much even without words by being in that space.
And to me, it's the ultimate compliment. I mean, unless people are doing something wrong, bad, but if you're on the right path, it's the ultimate compliment.
It really is. So thank you.
You're absolutely welcome. So thank you so much. And we'll wrap up now and hopefully we can do it again down the road.
That sounds great. I look forward to it. Thank you, John.
All right. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Evolved Caveman podcast. If you like what you've heard, support us by subscribing, leaving reviews, and sharing the podcast with friends and colleagues. For the latest, most powerful tools to connect with like-minded men, join the Facebook group at The Evolved Caveman. Follow Dr. John on Instagram at The Evolved Caveman, all one word, or join the email list by visiting guidetoself.com.